So the other aircraft I'd love to see would be the F-15E. For those that were involved with DCS, obviously there was the hiatus and the problems that have been associated with that. But if an F-15E rather than a C came into BMS and it kind of was flyable in the same way that it was in DCS, you're not necessarily wedded to a two-person crew. In the F-15E, it's a bit of a rare bird in that respect. It's not like the F-14, for example, where you absolutely need your Rio or you can't really fight the aircraft. The F-15E, you could, theoretically, I'd have to test it, but I think theoretically you could fly that from the front seat fairly effectively, if not reasonably effectively, at the kind of standards that us mere mortals that aren't real-life fighter pilots operate at.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Simulated Airspace, where we plan to have discussions on Falcon BMS, DCS, IL-2, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and other sims. Occasionally, we might discuss current, future, or past aviation-related events. This podcast, created by Prime, joined by Fisgas, and today our guest is Sharpe. I guess go with the introductions. My name is Fisgas. I have a small YouTube channel on which I do tutorials, some gameplay footage, and some other videos. And on to Prime.
I'm Prime, also known as Aviation Plus on YouTube. I create all types of experience level missions and tutorial videos for all experience types. So if you haven't heard of me, make sure you go to YouTube and type in Aviation Plus for more Falcon BMS missions and experiences. And then let's introduce Sharpe, our guest here.
Hi guys, so I'm Sharpe and I'm a simulator holic. Been doing it for a long time now. And I'm one of the founder members of 7-2 Squadron the Ghosts.
All right, cool. So, with this is the first episode of several, we hope, of this type, in which we invite someone to represent a multiplayer group and talk about that specific group and how they work. Each group gets formed in a different way from people with different backgrounds and locations where they're originally from. Every group is organized and fly missions in different ways, and we think by talking to them directly, to these groups, and have them share their stories, their perspectives, we hope to encourage more understanding and cooperation between different groups within the community. Today we have Sharpe with us from 7-2 Squadron. If you are part of a multiplayer group and you're listening to this episode, and if you'd like to come in on an episode as a representative of your multiplayer group, it doesn't have to be specifically for BMS, but it can be DCS and other simulators. Please reach out to us on the comments of this video or on Discord, and we will work something out.
Yeah, it'll be a good way to introduce the community, open some people's minds on different types of Discord and squadrons, as we call it, for more or less just groups flying together and getting in multiplayer, because sometimes people don't know where or how to fly in multiplayer, and the best way to fly in multiplayer is with a dedicated group for dedicated missions.
Okay, so I guess we move on to talking to our guest and about his group. But first, Sharpe, who are you? if that's not, I mean, I know, but to give us a short introduction of yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in my forces, UK based, and I've been flying flight simulators since probably the late 90s. Started with F-22 by DID, for those who remember. I think that must have been 97, 98 when that came out, and then Jane's F-15E came out not long after. And then, of course, Falcon came out at the back end of 98 and pretty much bought that off the shelf the moment I saw it. Did an awful lot of Falcon and then Allied Force when that came out. I try not to trigger you here too much, Fisgas, but I got into Lomac as well when that came out in the early noughts, and thus into DCS with the A10C in 2011, and I've basically been flying in the sort of DCS BMS community since probably sort of 2005, 2010-ish, that kind of window. Sort of bouncing back and forth, different squadrons, different groups, different simulators, and flying with new people, learning new things.
All right, cool. So that's the part. What I was gonna ask next about you, how you got into flight sims and all that stuff. So you are here in representation of 7-2 Squadron. I know there are other people who are part of, say, the leadership, but how about you tell us a little bit about how the group came about, 7-2 Squadron, and the distinction about specifically 7-2 Squadron, as
Yeah,
it
sure.
not to be confused with another group of in BMS, which is the 72nd wing. I think it's called.
Yeah, that's the guys. Right. Well, so on one of my journeys over to DCS, I was flying with a DCS group that probably not long after the F-16 came out into DCS, and as people probably remember, the moment it came out into DCS, it was pretty much a bag of hammers. But we're doing our best to try and fight through all the problems. And at the time, the group wanted some support with writing SOPs, and because I'd already flown with various squadrons in BMS, so the 185th, shout out to Vosine, Griffin, etc. And then, of course, we met Fisgas in the first, and then they of course separated. They sort of split into a DCS group for the FA-18 and then into the F-16 group that stayed under Zeus as the 440th. Shout out, great guy, great squadron. And I moved away from that because I wanted to have a look and a feel of what was going on with DCS. Also met Micro in the 440th as well in the first, so it's a small community, isn't it? Um, so having moved over to the DCS to dip my toe in the water there and see what it had to offer, I found myself writing SOPs for that squadron and found myself trying to fight through all of these problems that were inherent in the DCS version at the time of the F-16, which was sort of early beta, and it just wasn't working. And I said to the group, look, instead of trying to fight through all of these different problems and trying to learn an aircraft that is 50% complete, why not come over to BMS and do some of this flying in BMS? It'll be far easier to do this. We can follow the SOPs and the training that we're trying to do and not have all of the problems. And so a large number of people that were involved in that, and by large I mean probably about 8 pilots, maybe 10, came over and started using BMS while DCS was getting itself squared away. And for various reasons, we've all seen squadrons sort of come and go. That squadron started to segment a little bit. And as part of that, we decided that a small group of us, 4 pilots, would stay in BMS and form a whole new squadron in BMS. So those 4 pilots, including myself, sort of notionally in the lead, went over to BMS, and I continued training those 3 other pilots as part of this enhanced sort of training course that I'd designed. And we stayed in BMS, and he said, well, we're going to have to form a squadron. We can't just sit here as the 4 of us doing this. We want to bring more people in. We want to train more people and offer this kind of course to other people. And that's kind of where the squadron was born. So one of the guys in the squadron, who I'll name and shame later, is Swedish and was really head over heels in love with the Gripen. And he said, oh, hey, look, there's this squadron nearby us called 7-2 Squadron. It's a really great squadron. And of course, it's the best thing in the world because it flies Gripens. Why don't we call ourselves 7-2 Squadron? And hey, these guys have got a really cool logo of this sort of spectral ghost on a blue or a black background. Why don't we use that as well as a sort of homage to that unit? And that's how the squadron was born, 7-2 Squadron, the Ghosts, named for a Swedish Gripen squadron. The trouble was, and I knew this going in because there is another group, of course, in the BMS community that is very long-standing group called the 72nd Wing. And so I had to sort of reach out to those guys and say, hey, do you mind? But one of the things we agreed on was that we would remain 72 Squadron the Ghosts, so that when people try to apply for, say, the 72nd, they don't rock up at my squadron and feel let down by the fact that they're not where they thought they should be. Um, and as a kind of happy coincidence, and we couldn't have planned it if we tried. The day we came up with the name and we went sort of live with the squadron, 72 Squadron, the Ghosts, was actually Halloween 2020. So by luck, certainly luck more than judgment, we formed the squadron, the Ghosts, on Halloween. So how'd you like those apples?
How fitting on Halloween, the ghosts. It's pretty fitting. Thanks for the insight for DCS and BMS. And I do remember when the F-16 came out. I was so excited, being from BMS, so excited getting into DCS, seeing what the environment is like, because DCS had that more, people say more realistic, I guess more true to life environment when it comes to like the terrain, the weather, and all that stuff. So it was nice to be able to export and put the F-16 that I have come to love in BMS into DCS environment. And as you said, it was very, very rough to begin with. Debatably, it's still pretty rough with certain systems, but it's still fun to fly. There's a certain thing I want it to be, to kind of get better, the RWR, but that's a separate subject that I won't talk about here too much. But I do enjoy flying the F-16 in DCS as much as I have videos on BMS, but I do appreciate that insight into it, and kind of let me know that other people thought the same thing when it comes to the F-16, because when you're used to BMS and you go somewhere else, that's what you're basing everything off of is BMS.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember when it first came out, there was someone did a really good YouTube video on this, but you probably remember there was a problem with the F-16 model for crosswind landings. The moment you put it into a two-wheel touchdown, it basically rolled over, and hilarity would ensue. And they were showing videos actually of a comparison between, I think, a different DCS aircraft landing. It might have been the Hornet or the F-15C Flaming Cliffs module versus the F-16 in the same weather conditions, and it was noticeably different. And then someone posted another video showing the BMS variant, which is obviously a really good model because they've been at it for so long by then. But yeah, there was some real fun and games back in those days, trying to work your way through all these funny little gremlins.
I can think of two other issues that it had that are, to me, at the time of release, were kind of more serious than in the video I made about DCS. I brought one of these up. I brought at least. I'm not sure about the other, but one was the fact that the damage model, and this is turning into a problem for DCS type of episode. But one of them was the damage models at release was inexistent. If you wanted to take down the F-16, you'd have to hit the pilot specifically. You have to snipe it on the cockpit, like with a missile or with a gunshot. The other one was the RWR. If you did not possess this, and this was on release, they patched this out. I think it was one of the first things they patched out because it was egregious. It was that the RWR at release of the F-16 used the sounds of the RWR of the Hornet. And if you did not have the Hornet in your library and installed, you had no RWR sounds. So that was pretty bad. But yeah, that's just two things off of the top of my head.
I don't remember either of those ones, but then I did have the FA-18 module as well, and I don't see why you have a problem sniping the pilot with missiles or guns, Fiskas. I think that just says more about your flying than the quality of the DCS module.
Skill issue.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, skill issue. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so Sharpe, would you like to tell us where the people in the 7-2 Squadron are from, most like in a general sense?
Yeah, so we focus predominantly on European recruitment. must be able to speak English language. And the times that we fly generally mean that your people that join us are going to be in Europe. We've got one guy who was based in Europe, but has now moved himself over to the States. So that poor chap has to fly with us on a Sunday, sort of mid-afternoon, I guess, his time. But we've lost the ability to fly with him on a Thursday because obviously it's the middle of the working day for him. But I think unlike some of the other groups, we're just a little bit more compact in our recruitment.
Okay, so mostly European centric. And tell us or tell the listeners a little bit about how the how 7-2 Squadron is structured specifically.
Yeah, sure. So we adopt what I refer to as a very flat structure. I, I don't know how prototypical this is across the sort of BMS and DCS communities, but we don't kind of buy into the whole military rankings and that kind of thing. There are people in this community, of course, that have or are serving military, and yeah, they don't need to bring that home with them to do that. So we've got a really flat structure. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, answers on a postcard, please. But we have our founding members, which is myself and now 4 other chaps as well. Um, they essentially keep the lights on around the place. They help write the documents. They happen to be our senior instructor pilots, and we used to keep a website up, but we don't do that now because Discord can do it all now. It's easier. And those founder members, they're janitors basically. We just help steer the squadron. There's not much else that we do per se. And then below the founder members, we have members, and they're just the people in the squadron. They're the guys that have done the training course and are fully badged members of the squadron. The next in line, I suppose, would be what we refer to as student pilots. Those are pilots that have joined the squadron and are going through our Viper School training program. And then we've got sort of guest members. So those are people that we've flown with in various communities, normally Falcon Events, and they're pilots that sort of have a seamless integration with our flying SOPs and standards, so they can sort of come along and join flights with us or join the discussions on Discord. And then we got non-flying members, which, as any group has, there'll be people that just want to have a quick look over the fence but don't really want to sign up or do anything. So it's a very flat structure, and the way we try and organize it is, yeah, all right, the founding members sort of might host things, might keep things moving along, keep the lights on and turn them off when people leave. But other than that, it's very much a community group in that regards, and so every badged member gets a say in squadron direction, what we're doing, how things are being done, and we try to do that about every quarter, although it's been a very busy year last year and I don't think we did quite as many as we should have done. We got our next one coming up very shortly, and that's just an opportunity for every single pilot in the squadron to first of all answer the question, are you having fun? If not, why not? What can we do to improve it? Because it's just a hobby. Everyone should be having fun, or something's gone wrong. And then just to talk through the state of the nation, I suppose, in terms of where the squadron is, in terms of recruitment, pilots, active, not active, SOP state, training, all of that kind of stuff. So it's very much it's a small group, but it's a small group where everyone gets equal input into it.
Okay, cool. Sharpe, I would like to ask something that I've heard you mention since I first joined uh, 7-2 Squadron, which is your philosophy of of uh, practice makes permanence. I would like would like you, if you don't mind, to talk about that and elaborate, please.
As every single member of 7-2 Squadron immediately starts screaming and diving under the table. Yeah, practice makes permanence. That's one of several of my little adages. For those of you in America, you'll all know about Vince Lombardi, perfection is unobtainable. And I've always been of the philosophy that we can't fly a perfect flight. I've been flying these flight sims now for at least 20 years, and I've not had a single perfect flight once. There's always something you can do differently. There's always a little thing you can improve somewhere. And so part of the philosophy is that the more you practice something, the more you will become better at it. But the British idiom is practice makes perfect. But Vince Lombardi and many others would say that you can't achieve perfection, and certainly my experience in this simulation is that it's very, very difficult, if impossible, to be a perfect pilot. We're always learning, we're always educating ourselves in these types of study sims, which is, I think, part of the fun. And so the philosophy is very much practice makes permanence. The more you do something, the more it becomes repetitive, the better you become at it. But you will not necessarily be perfect, but that's okay because, as Vince Lombardi will point out, half the fun of trying to be perfect is the journey of trying to get there anyway.
Yeah, with being able to train many people in Falcon Lounge or the Sixth, which is my squadron, or just randomly around the community. When it comes to training, it's hard to train people because of we don't know their background. So we have people who have never seen an airplane before, never flown an airplane before, probably only flies, I don't know, I'm not dogging on War Thunder, but only flies one War Thunder with keyboard and mouse, so they may not be used to the joystick and throttle system. So if you train them going into BMS, we already know the pitfalls that they might have when it comes to getting used to the HOTAS, or depending on what they have, getting used to the HOTAS, getting used to head tracking, getting used to using radios, and all that stuff is their baseline. However, on the other side of that, we could literally have real pilots from either commercial pilot or Cessnas or literally military pilots coming into BMS, and they already have that baseline of understanding how aviation works, how the aircraft works, the intricacies of how to use the HOTAS and then the throttle and like some of the tactics, and like they know all that stuff baseline. So it's easier somewhat to teach them or to actually have them apply what they learned in a BMS mission. When it comes to people who have never done any of those things, you have to teach them. It's hard to teach without a chalkboard or whatever, like in a regular school. It's hard to do that. Also, time. Well, we don't get paid to teach people, so it's hard to teach people in their spare time. And it's also hard to teach someone who doesn't do the homework of reading the material or something beforehand. Like we only have maximum 3 hours when we do a training mission with the briefing, the actual in-game academics and actual in-game actions, and then the debrief is probably maybe 3 hours total. So that's the only time we have to teach you stuff. And in the cockpit when you're flying is the worst time to actually teach somebody. So you only have the briefing and the debriefing actually to teach. So all walks of life people come from, and it's sometimes hard to teach some people more than others. And then also with the negative training. So if you train yourself, played single player forever, you get these negative training attributes that would not be able to be applied in multiplayer. And you use those in multiplayer, and you learn really, really fast that you should not use that because it's the wrong thing. But all in all, the best way to learn is with someone else while reading the manual, watching videos, and learning during the debriefs when you do actually do missions with other people. But yeah, training is very important, and people from all walks of life come and play Falcon BMS, and it's hard to actually pinpoint what they need to know beforehand.
So, Sharp, I would like to ask, how is the syllabus, if we can call it that, how is the training organized in 7-2 Squadron?
So, sort of leading on from what Prime was saying, actually, he's hit the nail on the head. It's a diverse community that we fly in, and you could meet anyone along that journey. I've had the privilege of flying with pilots with combat operational experience, and you kind of sit there and you go, "What have I got to teach these people?" And normally, these guys are some of the most modest guys out there, and they're like, "Oh no, we can always learn something." And that was what inspired me to as part of the sort of the background of the squadron that we've already discussed. It was back in the DCS days, there was a bunch of people that were obviously new to simming, hadn't flown sort of structured flying like a mission before, even though some of them were, as you say, Prime, sort of self-taught either in single player or in other sims like Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I started at that point to bring together a course which is now the name of it is now Viper School, and that basically allows me to, as you know, part one of the SIPs in the squadron, to bring someone in who might be interested in flying for the squadron. We'll run a fam ride with them, see where they're at, have a chat with them about their background, how long they've been flying, what they've been flying, and so on. And you know, if you find someone who says, you know, what's a landing gear kind of thing, all the way through to I was flying combat sorties over Vietnam, there's a path through Viper School for everyone. That it's not just a tick box exercise, but it's designed from the ground up to help pilots that, in the first instance, our EFT elementary flight training course is designed to help pilots with those stick, thrust, and rudder skills, and to get yourself to the point where you are ready as an individual pilot to fly the aircraft solo. So that will include things like air-to-air refueling, basic handling of the aircraft, speed control, turn control, understanding the difference between instantaneous and sustained turns, flying circuits, all that kind of thing. And so we start those pilots there, but the only reason for that EFT course is to get pilots ready for the next course, which is what we call basic fast jet training. And that course takes a pilot who is capable of flying the aircraft, but perhaps has no experience flying a multiplayer environment. That might be missions, comms, standardized SOPs, that kind of thing. And we bring them through that process of formation flying, communication standards, brevity, and formation flying skills. And from there, we then get people starting to use the weapons that are available in BMS. We then move into what we call advanced fast jet training, which is starting to look at fighting the aircraft as a unit rather than flying the aircraft as a unit. And then we finish with our OCU course, which is essentially a mentored course of missions where you'll fly with one of the IPs on a mission, and they'll sort of help you as a sort of a handrail, someone to guide you through the mission. Because yeah, we've all been there. The BMS campaign is by far and away the best campaign that's out there at the moment, I think, in the flight sim world, certainly the modern flight sim world. And it's quite daunting if you just go into that for the first time and you've not really done it before. So we take a very simplistic sort of step by step process of training people, and that's supported with document packs so that when you do your EFT or your basic fast jet or whatever it is you're going through, there's learning material that they have, which is a combination of um, written material, diagrams, but also videos to various YouTube channels. You feature quite heavily, Fisgas, funnily enough. You're in a couple of them as well, Prime, but then also we lean heavily on other parts of the community. And one I would strongly recommend is Mike Solium's The Ops Center. If you haven't looked at it yet, look at it. It's amazing. The guy's an ex-USAF fighter pilot, and the material he puts together is fantastic and really well structured. So we provide that course and we provide that information to help people go through the process. But as you say, Prime, you can't force people to read. You can't force people to learn, and people will learn at different rates in different ways. Viper School is not a process to be passed or failed. It is simply a journey to go on, so that by the end of it, you're able to take part in a Cameo type flight as part of the dynamic campaign, be that with us or as we integrate with other squadrons and groups like Falcon Events.
So yeah, so next, let's kind of go over if you've had any training missions with PvP, so like player versus player. So have you put players on both sides and you shoot each other with missiles? I think we have CATMs now in BMS, so it's a little bit more training wise. They, instead of you completely dying, it's just beeps, so you know that you're dead. Everything else is the same. It's just that you get beeped at when you're dead. So have you done any PvPs or red flag type events where people are on both sides and you're going against actual humans?
So I think there's probably a double-sided answer to that question. Do we include PvP as part of our training? Yeah, absolutely. You have to. You can't teach people things like BVR or BFM without getting intimate with another pilot, because the AI is great, but it never does what you want it to do when you're trying to train people. So we use captive missiles now that they're available in the sim as part of our advanced fast jet training. Beyond that, we've also got more advanced courses that look more specifically at things like BVR, range work, which is obviously not necessarily combative, but you need to do it with multiple pilots in the sky, and other stuff like that. So we certainly make use of that. We don't necessarily do things more akin to red flag. Of course, the real red flag serves a specific purpose in real life as part of their training objectives and sort of the things they learn post Vietnam. I've done some PvP flying with sort of DCS groups like AMVI do something very similar to that. And then, of course, we've had Falcon Online, I think it was. I can't remember the name of the old PvP group that used to sit around. I used to take part in those types of events, but big sort of red flag exercises aren't part of something we do in our training yet. But it's certainly something to consider. It just puts quite a burden on trying to generate the required number of pilots for a training exercise.
Yes, yeah, it does come it does come into a kind of limitation factor of having the certain amount of people to have people on both sides, especially with red flag and large events. Do you have any training or anybody who actually does GCI, so AWACS portion of it, so the ground control interceptor?
Sadly, not. We don't have anyone in the squadron that does that kind of thing. We predominantly focus on having people in the squadron that are pilots first and foremost. Would we turn someone away that said, "Hey, I want to join the squadron, but I want to be a GCI or an ABM"? No, absolutely not. We wouldn't turn anyone away like that. And I've flown with people in the first, the 440th and Falcon events that have very kindly assumed those roles, and it brings a real extra layer of immersion to the missions. But we don't train it, and we don't necessarily recruit for it within our squadron, but we integrate with it as part of flying with other groups, as we've done with Falcon events, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, with GCI, I've had some really good missions with GCI, and I've even GCI'd myself. That's a really good immersion multiplier when it comes to playing in multiplayer there. You said you do training missions, and do you do any like campaign missions? So if you're in the campaign mission, you continue on, try to win the campaign with a certain group, or is it most, or that's just the training? But uh, what kind of stuff do you do with the campaign missions with everyone?
So once pilots have come out of the Viper School process, the squadron runs at the moment 2 flying nights per week, which at the moment is predominantly campaigns, and we're sort of work our way through all the different campaigns on different maps. We will do training sessions for currency purposes throughout the squadron, but last year in particular, there was a focus on flying the dynamic campaign, because the people that had joined the squadron the year before had been going through Viper School and they'd only just been badged, so we tried to focus more on getting them into the dynamic campaign. Big thanks to one of my founder members, 8ball, who very kindly ensured that was running through the majority of the year. That gives pilots the opportunity to put into practice what they've been learning through the Viper School course. But we do, as I say, we'll run, for example, IFR training routes. We'll do range work. We might focus on specific skill sets that might be lacking as a result of debriefs and lessons learned from the campaign. But generally speaking, we try to keep people using the dynamic campaign as much as possible once they've gone through Viper School. One of the things that's coming into the squadron this year will be more advanced courses, something to do beyond Viper School. That will be focused on really specific skill sets like advanced BVR tactics, BFM, that kind of thing, range work. But we've stripped some of that out of what used to be the old Viper School process. It used to be in the old Viper School process. It's not anymore. That's recognition of the fact that we want to get people through Viper School capable of flying in the dynamic campaign as part of a unit. And then again, practice makes permanence. The more you fly that dynamic campaign, the more experience you get. And then we can teach the more advanced stuff later as people choose to. Because, for example, there's no point spending hours and hours of your time or a student pilot's time teaching someone, I don't know, BFM and BVR skills until there's no more blood left in the horse anymore, because that particular pilot might not necessarily be an air-to-air focused pilot. They might really enjoy air-to-ground. So why waste all of that time trying to teach them, enhanced BVR and BFM tactics when actually their passion is air-to-ground? So we've kind of removed elements of that. We teach the functional side of it, get people capable of using the weapons, understanding how to conduct themselves in air-to-air and air-to-ground ops, but after that, if you want more specific and advanced training, then we've got the course to do the rest of it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, the six, we kind of have a similar type of thing where we train people coming up from either nothing or actual fighter pilots. So we kind of have the same type of stuff there. So gonna change gears here with FLUG, Flight Lead Upgrade. Do you have any flight lead upgrade training courses that you have at the 7-2 Squadron with 2-ship or 4-ship or maybe even package commander training?
We've not quite moved to package commander training, although it's definitely going to be a requirement at some point soon, just by nature of the way we've been progressing people through the squadron. We're getting to the point now where there's a couple of people that probably need to immerse themselves in that kind of experience. We've got what we refer to as a flight leads guide, which is highly contractual in terms of how you structure the flight, the things you can do and not do, how to brief, that kind of thing. But much like FLUG in real life, it's predominantly a mentored course. So we get people flying solo, solo, not in the mission, flying alongside an IP, and we basically turn the tables on people and say, okay, you're going to take me for a ride around, and you're gonna do this, and it's amazing. It happens all the time. It must be some kind of a block that people get. I remember it happening to myself as well. You've spent maybe a year or more flying in the simulator, hearing all the calls and getting really good at your brevity and your comms standard. And the moment you're asked, right, now you've got to just taxi this flight from the tree area to the runway and go through the comms, and you say, right, go, you're in charge. And they go, I don't know what to say anymore. And it happens every time, but you've got to sort of get people past that. And like you say, AP, the worst time to try and train people is A, in the cockpit, and B, on operational sorties as well. So we don't just throw people into it stone cold. We give them this course book that we've got, the flight leads manual, and we start people off as element leaders, flying with an IP as their number 4, getting them used to understanding how the element leader supports the flight lead, the calls they may have to make. Occasionally, we'll get the flight lead to say, right, okay, 3, you take the flight home now, and you've got the number 1 to help them if they sort of get themselves a bit confused or stuck. Once you've got someone that's done some effective element leading for a while, and if they want to go to the next level, of course, they'll do their flight lead upgrade, which is a kind of similar process. It's a mentored course, and that's where we have a senior instructor pilot with them. By that point, hopefully, it's less about how you fly as lead in a flight, making sure silly things like giving thrust margin and not yanking the flight around in violent maneuvers, that kind of thing. And it starts to focus more on what formations were you using? Why were you using those formations? Why did you decide to go to that location? What were your other alternatives? Did you notice these threats or these pop-ups over here? Why did you choose to disregard them? Was that a good thing, a bad thing, or just a decision you made? And then looking more intrinsically into the tactics. So as people prosecute missions, be that air to air or air to ground, we sort of take them through the decision-making process, but we allow them that opportunity to fly with a senior instructor pilot, in this case as their number two, so that they can always say, what do I do now? What would you do? Or if they get themselves into a lot of trouble, the IP can sort of give them a little nudge in the right direction. Sort of, hey, your element is 50 miles away from your current element lead. Why don't you try bringing them back in again? Oh yeah, of course, I'll do that. So little things like that, but it's very much a mentored process. I think there's only so much you can give people in terms of reading material for that. I think there's a heavy element of get the basics, do some safe to fail stuff, flying just as a pair, with someone who can help you get through the mechanics and through that first hump of knowing what to say and when to say it. And then after that, get them flying as element leaders, get them flying as flight leads, and in a mentored and structured way.
Yes, that first that first milestone and obstacle is getting used to what to say, when to say, why to say, and what to do. If you don't have the experience of all of those, it's hard to extract from your experience, which you lack of, and apply that to what you're going to say. So usually, the people who have been wingman for a bit, they would catch on to what their flight lead is saying. They'll catch on what the flight lead needs and wants before they need it, and then once they get into that understanding of expecting what the flight lead needs, then they can kind of move to flight lead, and they can kind of have that experience level of at least a wingman type of being able to move into a flight lead position, because being a flight lead is totally different than anything else, and it's a big milestone for most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it does. It comes in phases. I mean that thing you're talking about with the either a number two or a number four learning from their respective element leads. I think it's the term the RAF uses, the thinking wingman. First of all, you're going to be thrown into the number two slot and you're going to be spoon fed quite a lot of it, but eventually you'll get to the point where you become slightly more autonomous, capable of not only making certain decisions on your own, but also predicting what your element leader is going to be doing. At that point, you got that confidence to go into the number four slot. And then from there, it's, do you want to do this? Do you want the element lead role? But of course, the difference between the simulator and the real life is that in real life it's a very structured process that you go through. We don't always have that luxury in the squadron communities, even big squadrons and big groups like the 72nd or Falcon events, because you don't always get to rigorously enforce that 1-3-4-2 structure of seniority based on experience and all the rest of it. So sometimes it's just about doing the best you can. And we've certainly seen people doing that in our squadron because sometimes it's just your turn to step up and be an element leader, either during the briefing because it's your turn to be an element leader kind of thing. You can't keep hiding in the 2 and 4 slot all the time. And equally, you never know when your number three is going to get shot down. And so then you do end up as that element leader role. So, people kind of learn by osmosis quite a bit. But once someone turns around and says, look, I want to do this more regularly, that's when you start trying to take them through that more structured process. But as a reasonably small squadron of about, I think it's about 15 pilots that we've got active at the moment, the ability on any given flight night to generate enough pilots where you can always put your least experienced pilots into the number two slot and then your next most experienced into the number four slot and then actual bona fide element flight and package leaders into the correct slot. Well, sometimes you just have to make do with what you've got.
Yeah, it's definitely a a process to go through things because it's a building block process. You can't put someone straight into flight lead and they'll crash and burn because they don't know anything. So the building block process is the way to go with learning anything, but mostly aviation because there's different milestones and blocks to actually understand first before you can move to the next block. That's very important because you don't want them to be overwhelmed with a whole bunch of stuff and learning different things. um,
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't
yeah.
agree more.
So the other question was with what is it like to make missions? So you said that you sometimes make some campaign missions. Is the focus on like action? Like, are you focused on how much action is in the mission and how much the people actually do things, or are you more focused on the storyline progress of the campaign to move forward? So is it the fun or the fun slash action, or is it like the storyline that you focus on when making missions?
I'd say it's elements of both, but with another sort of nugget thrown in there, which is inverted commas realism. And the reason I say that is because when I try and frag a mission for a multi-flight package, I'm trying to think how many people are going to be in the mission, what average quality are they going to be, and what could a minimum or maximum number of pilots generated into this mission actually achieve. I have seen missions, I'm sure we all have, where people try to go a bridge too far, in some cases literally with bombing bridges, and they bite off more than they can chew. I try to keep the missions that we run very focused, and yeah, the packages are almost self-selecting in the dynamic campaign, assuming you're doing something that is ground attack based, strike based. You'll have a striking flight. You'll have either a SEAD strike or DAD strike or a SEAD escort, and then you'll have a sweep and you'll have escort type flight. Yeah, that's almost self-selecting in the dynamic campaign, especially early on in the dynamic campaign where you've got to put that extra protection in for SAM threats and air threats to get your package in and out. And we just try to focus on getting the strikers to hit one target effectively. Now that I'm not saying an bridge, it might be an air base, and we'll get the runway or runways denied, and maybe some of the logistics around it, ammo dumps and fuel, that kind of thing. But then everything else is about supporting that strike flight into the target. We don't try to overextend by hitting too many things in one go, unless there's a specific campaign requirement to do so. So, early on in the campaign, you can sometimes get away with throwing up a lot of DAD missions with SDB or JSOW occasionally and stripping out some of those pockets of SAMs early on. Whether that's realistic or not from a planning perspective, I can't comment and won't comment, but certainly you can get away with it early on in the dynamic campaign because there's less aircraft coming at you, and we've got more standoff capability in BMS than we had sort of 20 years or so ago. So yeah, it's about making sure the package can achieve its mission and get pilots home again, rather than just what's the maximum amount of destruction or the most amount of kills we can generate in one go. But in terms of the story-driven side of it, I mean, the dynamic campaign is the story in its own right, from my perspective. You are immersed in this kind of geopolitical scenario, and your strategy is somewhat clear as a result of the information being handed down to you by the simulator, and so you're essentially playing your part in that dynamic campaign. And again, the overarching strategies tend to be fairly generic once you've been flying these types of simulators for a while. Get the runways knocked out, get the radars knocked out, get the SAMs knocked out, and then after that start chewing away at the other targets, the logistics, and the ground threats. From what I understand, speaking as a military historian, it's not dissimilar to the approach Western militaries use even to this day.
Yep, yep. Very good insight. Appreciate the insight.
Yeah, I think everyone. I think most campaigns, most everyone flies the campaign in a similar way, and where their starting point is, what they do when they start with the mission order, and then yeah, from my experience, I've never seen anyone like go after, I don't know, boats, naval targets in the opening days of the campaign. Um, so Sharp, on 7-2 Squadron, uh, is there a specific variant of the Viper that you focus on? And if there is one, why that one specifically?
Not really. I think from a training perspective, we focus on the Block 50s or 52s for no other reason than I think it was the default um, aircraft that came up. But we certainly don't fly, for example, like the HAFs with the conformals and all that kind of thing. We have flown campaigns where that's been mandated. You know, some of Falcon Events missions we've flown in some of the newer theatres, different theatres, and they put you in the different aircraft, obviously from a thematic perspective. So that's always good fun to have a go with these new aircraft types, you know, from different blocks, different variants. But I think predominantly we're sort of 50-52 guys.
All right, cool. How about Eagle training or F-15 training? Is that a thing that is done in 7-2 Squadron? Is If not, is that something that you guys consider, or is that off the table currently?
We're certainly not off the table. Our SOPs are really about how a flight operates rather than being aircraft specific. Now, there might be a couple of things you might need to adjust, you know, certain speeds or whatever for certain aircraft types, but we wouldn't block anyone from saying, hey, you know, we want F-15 specific training. But the reality is that a lot of the training we provide in 7-2 Squadron isn't about buttonography and switchology. A pilot is normally more than capable of going away and learning that themselves by YouTube resources. You know, there's this guy called Fisgas Fighters. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's got some really good channel information on there, and you can learn this stuff yourself, as you know, Fisgas. So,
For an Eagle, not from my channel.
well, you know, you just got to get there. You'll get there in time. But no, my ultimate hope for BMS is that we see more aircraft coming in, different modules to use the DCS term, and we've started to get a sniff of that with the F-15C. Why don't we use it in 7-2 Squadron? Well, obviously when it first came out, it was, you know, it was still finding its way in life. I understand it's a lot more streamlined now, works really quite well. But it does also require a certain type of pilot. You know, it's someone who wants to fly air to air for all of their missions. And I think generally in 7-2 Squadron at the moment, the consensus, the general view is more towards multi-role. Um, but as you know, there's no reason we couldn't form an F-15C squadron. The SOPs would probably just work for an F-15C squadron, and the training would also work for an F-15C squadron. Might need to be a little bit of tinkering around with certain elements that are specific to the systems, but for the most part, um, you know, good training is good training at the kind of unit level, and individual aircraft training, well, that's just a pilot currency thing. That's up for every individual pilot to deal with. I would absolutely dearly love to have a different aircraft from the F-16 available in that simulator. You know, the moment they give me a Super Hornet to fly, or maybe a Eurofighter Typhoon, I'd be all over that like a bad rash. I'd be the first person to form a sort of a new group within 7-2 Squadron that focuses specifically on that aircraft. So the other aircraft I'd love to see would be the F-15E. For those that were involved with DCS, obviously there was the hiatus and the problems that have been associated with that. But if an F-15E rather than a C came into BMS and it kind of was flyable in the same way that it was in DCS, you're not necessarily wedded to a two-person crew in the F-15E. It's a bit of a rare bird in that respect. It's not like the F-14, for example, where you absolutely need your Rio or you can't really fight the aircraft. The F-15E, you could theoretically, and have to test it, but I think theoretically you could fly that from the front seat fairly effectively, if not reasonably effectively, at the kind of standards that us mere mortals that aren't real life fighter pilots operate at, and really have quite a lot of fun with that. So yeah, dev gods, please, an F-15E as soon as possible, please. We'll be your first squadron on the door.
Yeah, that's if we get.
Yeah, an F-15E is I know is a pipe dream for a lot of people, especially with what's been going on in the F-15E on the DCS side of things.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
if we get
absolutely.
to get the multi crew stuff, which would be good for training. Which we have some F-16 D models would be awesome as well for multi crew.
Well, multi-crew is a whole different thing. I think for me the F-15E is good because it brings the ability to do multi-role ops. You can do air-to-ground and air-to-air just as effectively as well, reasonably effectively compared to the F-15C. But multi-crew flying, now there's a whole other can of worms. I mean, on the one hand, if it's hard enough to generate a flight of 4 pilots and a package of say 20 pilots for the BMS community. Imagine how hard that's going to be when you immediately halve that and you say, right, okay, you need a front seater and a back seater, and all of a sudden you're down to maybe pairs of pilots that have to have an entirely new component of SOPs in terms of cockpit managing and how they do that. So for me, I mean, some of my most favorite aircraft in the world are multi-seat aircraft, but would I want to fly them in the sim? Probably not. It's probably the obsessive compulsive in me that just, who the hell are you in the back of my aircraft? Get out, let me fly it kind of mentality. But from a training perspective, I would love to see some twin seats, either a super prop or a prop, and then going into a more advanced trainer like is it the M246 Master or the Red Tail that's just come out in America. You could do some really good training with that, and actually the Viper School program as it stands now is actually designed with that eventuality in mind, so that if a basic fast jet or an advanced fast jet train or even a sort of a proper aerobatic prop or an aerobatic turboprop came out, there are each level of those stages of Viper School can be conducted in the appropriate aircraft. It'd be good fun. I'd love it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we would like to ask you, Sharpe, about like a couple of interesting or curious stories or situations that have happened within or happened to 7-2 Squadron.
Well, I still say the spookiest one is us by accident naming the squadron the Ghosts on Halloween. I mean that we couldn't have planned that if we tried, but as with any squadron, you've got your particular characters in the squadron, and everyone has different experiences. But I think for me, some of the funnier ones are actually the ones that come out of Gremlins that people haven't quite identified as Gremlins yet. There's a guy in the squadron who, for want of embarrassing them, will remain absolutely nameless. Muff. And we used to call him the Swamp Master because every time he landed during training, and even after he'd been a badged pilot, he had this bug in his setup for some reason that when he went on the toe brakes, they wouldn't work. And as a result of that, he always ended up in what used to be the swamp at Gunsan on the northwest side of Gunsan. And so he ended up being called Swamp King and Swamp Master for a very long time. Um, I think talking a lot about the training, it's amazing how quickly training goes out the window. I remember flying with two of the guys from the squadron not long after they'd come out of Viper School, and we'd spent, you know, tens of flights, tens of hours explaining to them about cornering speeds for the F-16 and what how to do BFM. And then what happens? The first instance of a potential bit of BFM in a campaign, which is actually, quite rare in the dynamic campaign. And what happens? You watch the Acme as they come in at sort of max silly and try to do their first turn, and the turning circles measured in continents as they try and get round the corner at 750 knots. And you kind of go, where, do you remember the training? And it's like, yeah, it was red mist. I can't remember. I just remember the blood pulsing through my ears, but it was good fun. Sorry, it took me an extra 5 minutes to get into the fight while I resolved that problem. That was a good one. And I think one of the other ones, which is again another one from training actually. One of the guys in the squadron, who I won't embarrass any further, Muff, was, I think I've mentioned before, he's actually Swedish, and we took them through the Loose Deuce, the supporting engaged fighter contract as part of training. And obviously, that's a lot of pilot loading for someone that hasn't done that type of BFM and ACM before. And watching that particular person who's not unintelligent degenerate into Swedish mumbling to the point where I thought all my IKEA furniture had some kind of spell being cast upon it. So it's dancing around the room behind me as he just the loading on the pilot. Obviously, he stopped speaking English, started speaking Swedish, could barely get through Swedish, and was just randomly muttering words in Swedish. He still won't tell me what he said. I don't think he actually knew himself. But I think for me, the best one would be during a dynamic campaign. Now, obviously, we spend a lot of time training pilots in this squadron. We've spoken a lot about the Viper School course, and it's in my mind, it's necessary for people's immersion. That's what it's there for. But it was absolutely brilliant to be flying along in an extended card formation to hear my Element 4 turn around and say, "Oh, what's this aircraft flying alongside us? I didn't know the electric lightning was modelled in this game." And you could sort of hear the confusion in his voice. "I'm not sure it's an electric lightning. Maybe it's the space shuttle. What the hell is going on?" And obviously the number 3 had twigged it and looked round and went, "No, that's I think it was like a MiG 19 or a MiG 21 or something that basically got right in behind the flight, undetected, probably come up from underneath us or whatever, and was basically, inverted commas, in formation. Reality, Acme confirms, was actually shooting at this guy with the gun, because the thing had already fired missiles and just clean missed as they do. And all of a sudden you just hear the number 3 scream, "Split!" And they both go into what was actually at the time, notwithstanding the fact that they'd let this aircraft sneak up on them, looking at the Acme, it was absolutely textbook defensive split into two-ship ACM against this other aircraft. But the pilot involved, Sino, has never been allowed to live it down ever since.
Nor they should. I have a curious, well, short event. Me and one, when I flew actively with 7.2, I had I'd say a buddy. I had a buddy in there that would always go along with my crazy ideas, whatever I had for the day. Whenever I DM'd him saying, "Hey, I want to try this. Are you in?" And he'd always say yes without a fault. His name is Vlad. Hi, Vlad. How are you doing? I hope you. It's been a while. So one day I go to Vlad and I say, "Vlad, I want to try the F-22." And he's like, "Let's try the F-22." And that was the weirdest flight one of the weirdest flights I ever had, because the modeling of the F-22, for obvious reasons, in BMS isn't perfect by a long shot. I don't think I'm sure the modeling of the performance of the F-22 is very much classified. So we were basically, the way it behaved is like it was kind of glued to the runway until it wasn't. And then I remember we were up. I don't remember if we were flying a campaign or a tactical engagement, whatever it was. But there were enemy air defense units there and enemy aircraft. If I recall, we went up to MiG-23s that were flying their flight path, and us and F-16s. Obviously, they're supposed to come across us and start shooting at us. They had no idea we were there, and basically we formed up with them, and then we both pulled back and shot them with missiles. And then we flew over an SA-2 or an SA-5 or whatever, but we kept looking like we saw the signal, the emissions of the unit in our RWR, but they weren't tracking us. We were just receiving their signals, their transmissions. They only saw us when we were basically overhead, and they took shots. They immediately started shooting like crazy, but we just had like the bank away and put like a couple of miles distance between us and the location of the SAM radar, and it lost us right away after. So that was pretty fun. The flying the F-22 like that.
Well, I'm not surprised those, what was it, 23s couldn't see you when you formed up with them. I mean, it is a stealth fighter, so I mean, obviously visually you can't see it either. It must have some kind of cloaking device as well, but that's what you pay all the money for these 22s and Nighthawks and Penguins and such.
Yeah, I don't recall. I think we went like under them and then came back, and like went way under them and came back around or something like that, and then formed up on them. It was pretty. It was pretty interesting.
Stealth mode activate. The switch in the cockpit, I swear.
Yeah, blatantly. I'm pretty sure I've seen that in one of the movies as well.
Yeah, something like that. So do you guys have the 7-2 squadron have any team versus team type events participation before in the past?
No, we've not done it. I mean, that might be a bias from myself. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but they used to be. You'll remember it, Fisgas. Even if you, I don't know if you did it Prime, but sort of 10 years ago or so now, there was that constantly active PvP environment that we used to fly in the first and the 440th. I can't remember what it's called now, but anyway, it was. I always used to say that it generated some really bizarre behaviors because you'd get the people that just went in there in order to get kills, and they didn't care whether they were flying tactically or not. You know, they'd have one person run in with their sidewinders, get a GCI vector on a flight, and just come in and kill as many as they could before they got taken out, but not necessarily applying sort of logical tactics, survivable tactics. And I always used to see it generate, bad, what I would consider to be, bad practice in pilots. Thinking about kill counts rather than mission completion. Um, and as a result of that, we've not done a lot of, team on team, player on player before. It can be a really good training tool, but again, you've got to generate the number of pilots you need for it. Would I say no to it in the future? No, absolutely not. If people want to do it, then do it. We shall. I don't think I've seen that much of it available these days in BMS. Um, I think more critically as well, I think people quite enjoy the dynamic campaign and the whole, flying against the AI in that really immersive environment that we get in dynamic campaign, which, in the opening days could be really, really full on. So, I'm not going to say no to it, certainly, but we've not done it since forming the squadron.
Yeah, and remember Falcon Lounge did their TvT back in 2020, so everybody had the time to actually get to the game, and there was a whole bunch of people, very high participation rates, and that was the time where I got most of my TvT experience from. And as you said, it is a good training to be able to know and understand that there are humans on the other side in the F-16 or the aggressors or whatever they do. So your heart rate goes up when you see, because they had AI as well, so computers in there as well. But for our situation, we had the aggressor. So if you saw a 29, that meant it was a MiG-29, but it's a aggressor F-16. So you would immediately know that it's a human in that F-16. So you would change your tactics, your heart rate would go up, you'd start blood going through your brain, and your adrenaline goes up, and you do your foxes, whatever, and then the person chases you, and it's just so much fun. But as you said, with the amount of people, you need a lot of people to be able to have two packages per or on one side, so two packages total to be able to fly in there. And now with not being in during COVID, we don't have as much time as we did before, but TvT is definitely something that's really, really fun, and you could apply the training that you have that's also different from the training with the AI computers flying, because humans are smart and they try to trick you into things, and it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't argue with that. If it's available, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, it's been a while since I did some TV, since I've done some TVT stuff too, personally. But yeah, I think I was part of the event, or at least at some point on some event. But this was like, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe more. Were like the guys on the other team were F-16s, but their RWR emissions on our as we received them, they came off as MiG-29s. So I remember that. Um, how about participation that 7-2 Squadron has had with other groups like Falcon Events in a more, not as much as a in a PvP or TVT type of situation, but more along the lines of a cooperative situation?
Well, we've certainly flown quite a lot over the years with Falcon Events, alongside Micro and his band of merry pilots. Big shout out to Micro, does a lot for the community. Um, we've not done as much with Falcon Events lately because Falcon Events has been putting a focus recently on training, but we do still occasionally manage to get to their flights. We do have an outstanding commitment to join some of the 72nds open flight nights. That was an invite made to us last year very kindly by the 72nd. Unfortunately, we've been neck deep training some new pilots at the back end of last year, so we've not been able to go and do that. But now that we're coming out of that sort of training phase, it's something that I'll be looking to get in touch with the 72nd, and I think also Zeus in the 440th has said about doing some cooperative flights as well, in dynamic campaigns. But I think more recently our background is integrating alongside Falcon Events. That's not to say that we won't or don't want to do it with anyone else. We very much do. And for anyone, any of the squadron bosses out there, Vosine, Griffin, Zeus, if you guys want to join into some of our missions or vice versa, so much the better, because we can generate bigger packages and bigger mission sets that way. Obviously, it's a little bit more logistically difficult. You need to get a better idea of how many people are going to come along and who's going to do what flights for that kind of thing. But it's not beyond the art of the possible. It's quite easy to do, thankfully, in the BMS mission editor. So, yeah, we'll be looking to do a lot of that coming up over the next year or so, definitely.
All right. Um, I would like to ask, what are your personal thoughts between or with DCS and BMS? I know you fly uh, or have flown aircraft modules in DCS for quite a while. I'd like to ask your opinion on that.
You sure I'm not going to trigger you there, Fiskas? I don't want to trigger a rage out.
I just, I'm fine.
Fair enough. Just hold on really, tightly to your chair or your desk or something. Think happy thoughts. Right. Well, where do I see the difference between BMS and DCS? Well, I think it's probably worth starting with. Obviously, I'm not a real life pilot, general aviation, commercial, or military, or anything in between, frankly. So there's only so much I can comment on the accuracy of flight models and stuff. I think it's reasonably well agreed across both communities that the BMS flight model is probably better for the F-16. But of course, DCS gives you access to lots and lots and lots of different modules. And if, like me, you're a serial button presser and you like learning new things, DCS gives you a lot of variety in the different modules you can engage with when it's not, removing them from your access for one reason or another. I think for me, though, they're different communities born of where they came from in life. And, obviously, BMS is very much focused around the F-16 and the dynamic campaign that comes with it. DCS had been talking about a dynamic campaign since not long after I started flying it. On the A10, that was a good 10 years ago now that they've been talking about it, and it's allegedly coming. But BMS has had that since the moment it came out, and you see a different type of platform as a result of those backgrounds, whereas DCS is much more, I would say, clinical, arguably sterile. There's also a lot of really good stuff you can do with mission editing at the scripting level. Some really clever stuff, which I would absolutely love to see in BMS, because BMS is kind of a big handfuls and big map kind of view, whereas DCS is smaller handfuls on a map, and you get that kind of additional detail at the lower level. Um, and as a result of that, there are certain things that certainly DCS can do that BMS can't, and vice versa. I've said it once, I'll say it again. The ideal would be that you smash both together and end up with, inverted commas, a perfect sim by taking the worst bits out of both and bringing the best bits into both. As that's not going to happen. Stand fast, whatever is going on with Falcon 5, which I know close to nothing about other than what's on internet hype and speculation, so I won't even comment on it. I enjoy both for different reasons, as I dare say a lot of different people do. What I've always found curious, however, and I'm not 100% sure as to why it happens this way, but certainly DCS has the benefit of being one of the easier gateway drugs into study combat sim level. It's much more visible until, like, I think probably BMS 3.6. It was a lot easier from a GUI perspective to get moving and get working. You had access to free modules, and yes, I know, for all intents and purposes, BMS is free, but DCS did a good job from, the 2020 teens, whatever it was, and low Mac days before it, of having a reasonably easy to use user interface. And as a result of that, it's a much bigger community, I would argue, but you see a lot of churn in that community, which is, I think, arguably a bit PvP focused in some places, more so than BMS, which is interesting because obviously you guys have asked a lot of questions about PvP flying and player on player flying as part of campaigns and stuff. You see much more of that in DCS, and if that's your jam, then obviously that's a great place to start. But I think recently, over the last 2 years, BMS has made a couple of very noticeable changes. The quality of the graphics and the terrain, access to VR and so on, that has really brought BMS along to challenge some of the stuff that DCS had that BMS didn't, puts it on a much more even keel. I've never been a sort of a graphics junkie. I know a lot of the people in the DCS community get quite het up over their shaders and their lighting and their FPS and all of that. But I've always been happy with potato graphics. I'm a function before form kind of pilot, and as long as the simulation is immersive and doing what I want it to do, I don't really care that much how it looks. But I think BMS has moved along quite a way in the last 2 years, and it's made up a lot of ground on DCS. But as I've said already in this discussion, I want some more modules. I'd love to see more modules in BMS. I think it's desperately needed. Um, and thus I come back to what I've already said. Get both of them, smash them together, remove the not so good bits, and keep the good bits. And my God, what sim you would have!
Yeah, that's a very good point. Uh, what if someone is interested in joining 7-2 Squadron? Would they be? Is there a way that they'd be satisfied? Say they are interested in DCS over BMS. Do you guys host DCS flights as well, or just BMS?
Not at the moment. We don't. We've sort of agreed as a squadron over the years that we will be a BMS squadron. Now, obviously, that may change in the future. It's the 7-2 squadron members will make that decision, not me. But we're sort of firmly entrenched in BMS at the moment. And as far as I'm concerned, long may that continue, because I think trying to do what we do in DCS would be close to impossible because of the lack of the dynamic campaign. But we as a squadron don't impose any rules on who else you fly with per se. I know some squadrons in BMS and DCS will stand up and say, "Thou shalt not fly DCS," or "Thou shalt not fly with another squadron." We don't have that limitation per se. If someone wants to join our squadron and fly with a DCS squadron, that's fine, so long as two things are true. Number one, you don't give our material that we generate to other communities, because obviously that's ours, it's generated in-house, and you commit to our squadron for the nights that we fly. So that's predominantly a Thursday and a Sunday evening UK time. Other than that, you're pretty much free to go away and fly with whoever you want, either in the BMS or the DCS community, because again, this is a study sim, it's a hobby, and if you're constantly learning and you're getting good value from that, then cracking. Please continue to do so. Just don't forget the standards and the SOPs we fly to when you come back and you do flying with us. It's just about activity, as any sort of community gaming group will know, you don't exist if no one shows up. So it's all about ensuring that you remember, if you're a 7-2 squadron member, that we fly on a Sunday and a Thursday. And quite frankly, I'd no more consider telling people not to fly DCS or with another BMS squadron on any of the other nights than I'd consider telling them not to play golf or play tennis on any of those other days. It's not for me to dictate.
That is a very open type of approach. I know there are groups, squadrons, like you mentioned, who say you are with us. We there's going to be a problem, so to say, so to speak. I'm not sure if I'm using the right expression, but if we catch you with another flying in with another group of whatever flight sim it is, any other group, then there's going to be problems. Um,
It's a shame,
oh,
really, because I mean I can understand the certain squadrons making that decision, and the a DCS BMS divide. I think that just becomes a bit tribal more than anything else. But I can understand the logic of we want people to commit to our squadron because you're worried that you'll see those people drop off and drop away. As far as I'm concerned, like I said, first of all, it's not my place to dictate what you do. I play tennis 3 or 4 nights a week. You wouldn't think about telling me to stop playing tennis just because I do flying on a Thursday and a Sunday. But then equally, pragmatically speaking, I've got better things to do with my time than trying to enforce that, because it's just too easy to mask. If you're a pilot with, say, 7-2 Squadron, and we impose those kind of conditions, you can just easily mask who you are in the Discord TeamSpeak world that we live in, and forum-based world that we live in. I'm not a forensic investigator. I've got better things to do in my time.
yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of groups adopt that posture because they worry about that, or one of the factors I think is they might worry about what you were talking about earlier about generating enough guys on mission nights or mission days, whatever, to fly a mission on that particular day. I think that's part of it, or at least one of the aspects of that, I think.
Oh yeah, and I absolutely get it. I absolutely get it. You, but then equally you can impose those rules and still see that ability to generate pilots drop off for one reason or another. Real life is a thing, and it should always come first over a hobby, no matter what the hobby. So that ability to generate pilots, it's a reasonable decision. But I would look at it the other way round, which is, if someone is really into the hobby and they want to fly it 5, 6, 7 times a week or even more, great, because practice makes permanence, right? The more you fly, ultimately over time, the better you would get. Although as people watch me fly, they may contest that opinion. But why would you prevent people from learning more stuff and becoming a better pilot through practice and experience? If you see people dropping off and not joining, certainly in 7-2 Squadron, we've got rules around leave of absence and how long you spend away from the squadron for any given time, and you've got to, you got to commit to the squadron over a n period of months. And if you're not showing up, we'll sort of say, hey, are you right? What's going on? Real life is a thing, as you well know, Fisgas. That's fine. People go away and they do other stuff for one reason or another. It may not even be simulation related and hobby related. But certainly, I think in our case, if we saw someone not attending regularly, we'd be chatting with that pilot and working through what it is. Have they lost interest in the sim? Have they found another group? Is it something we're doing wrong as a squadron? These are all important questions to ask and to and to understand. And ultimately, if someone isn't attending the flight nights on a regular basis, well, that's just a an issue of not attending. What is causing that is a completely different issue, and it might be that they found another group, or it might be that they don't enjoy the group that they're in, or it might be they've gone off and had a kid and sort of thought that there'd be back in about 3 months' time, and then heard all of the other parents in the group laughing at them and giving them a pat on the back and saying, "Yeah, right. Of course, that's what's going to happen." You never know, but yeah, we don't mandate whether you can or can't join other squadrons or do other things. We just expect people to rock up and fly our way when they're with us, and if they're not doing that, then we can have that discussion with the pilot. But that is just a question of why aren't you joining our flight nights? Simple as.
How about presence in YouTube or a platform similar to YouTube? Do you have, or does 72 Squadron have a YouTube channel or somewhere where people who are interested in learning more about 72 Squadron, where they could find videos of flights that the group takes part in?
Well, formally, no, we don't have that kind of presence. I think in a way um, we kind of shy away from it. We're a relatively small group. Those who know are more than welcome to come and chat with us, or even fly with us, or join us. But we don't have much of a presence in terms of YouTube. I think the closest we get, frankly, Fiscus, is your channel, which is not a 7-2 Squadron channel for obvious reasons. It's your channel for helping people learn the aircraft and the sim. But that's probably about as close as we get to a YouTube presence, other than, of course, when we've flown with people in our squadron or other people's squadrons that have happened to either stream or record the flight. We occasionally crop up in that. There's a absolutely appalling video of me flying with Micro back in the 440th days that exists. I would love to have, at the very least, an internal 7-2 Squadron channel that helps with the material that is present in the SOPs and Viper School to help people learn. Some people like me are visual learners. They don't learn through reading material in a document. That's fine. I don't have that skill set. I wish I did, because I'd generate videos in a heartbeat. It's certainly something I would aspire to do. Whether or not that became a community thing or just a enclosed 7-2 Squadron thing, well, I'll cross that bridge if and when I need to get to it. But for now, a lot of the sort of the training material that I'd love to generate as part of our Viper School program in terms of YouTube content, we rely on other sources of information for that, as I discussed earlier.
Yeah, I have a few videos. Well, not. I think the material I generated before was streams that I did flying with you guys, just training flights, campaign flights, even flights with Falcon events. One event I was there to participate in, and that was back in the days where I streamed using a VR headset. That's been a while. But anyway, which in which way can people reach out to you? Be it if they are interested in joining the group itself, or just like to get something organized, like a cooperative mission or a event, how would they go about reaching you or 7-2 Squadron in general?
Yeah, so it used to be quite easy. We used to have a website, and that obviously had the ability to make contact with, the squadron, myself or others. Um, I think these days we do have as part of the BMS forums, we've got a post about the squadron, which I actually need to update at some point in the next couple of weeks. Um, and we have a Discord link for it in there, but for reasons best known to Discord, despite being a perpetual invite, it obviously goes offline after about a week or a month or whatever it is, and just constantly needs to be updated. So probably the easiest way for pilots to access me is to find me on the BMS forums. I think I am simply Sharpe on the BMS forums, although someone else can double check me on that. I think I'm Sharpe on the BMS forums. You can hit me up via that. Alternatively, Fisgas, obviously you've helped out occasionally. People have reached out via your channel, and that you've got them in touch with myself as well. It's certainly an area for improvement. I would say we could probably do a little bit of a better job with that, and the lack of the website now. Yeah, it was the right decision to get rid of the website, but it creates a bit of a void in terms of people getting in touch with us.
So, Sharp, I think we're pretty much coming up at the end of our interview, so to speak. What else would you like to share with us or comment or any of that?
I think for me, the thing I would say, whether you're from the DCS community or the BMS community or other parts of the wider flight sim community, I think there's too many people that are scared to join squadrons. I'm not talking about 7-2 Squadron or any other squadron, just in general, because there's a perception that it's an elite or it's a clique or whatever. Reach out, please reach out to the squadrons, be they in BMS or even DCS, if that's your particular brand of vodka. You'll be amazed how friendly the community is once you actually start speaking to people within it. And don't be afraid if you're all new to this. There are many squadrons out there, not just 7-2 Squadron, that will help bring pilots from zero to hero, as the expression goes, in a range of different ways. And you can pretty much cherry pick which one works for you, whether you want a more in-depth process or a faster route to flying missions. But there's loads of friendly people out there, and there's loads of friendly communities out there. And I beg of you, if you're hearing this and you're not sure, reach out to the community. You'll be surprised who and what's out there on both sides of the BMS DCS divide. So the only way this community will survive is by bringing more people into it, and I think that's generally recognised across a lot of the squadrons, and that's why we spend so long training people and helping bring people into our particular groups in our own sort of unique and special ways. The community will die without new people. So definitely reach out. Don't be afraid. Don't be nervous. Don't be scared. We all started somewhere. So definitely reach out. It's probably about the only thing I would add to this, other than thanks for having me, guys, and I hope I haven't been too boring or rattled on for too long.
Nope, it was a good interview, and do appreciate your time. And I hope everyone learned something and able to get more involved in the community. We do enjoy having this podcast and interviewing people. So again, if you like the podcast, comment down below. It's also on Spotify. So comment down below what you want. If you want to be able to interview your unit or squadron, let us know. Reach out to us. And do appreciate everyone listening. And I'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.
See you, everyone.